These are 6 countries that, or pseudo countries, well, I'll describe it as pseudo countries in a minute, that have sovereignty, no treaty with the United States, but are friendly with the United States. Now, I'm going to pick the first one to use as an example, the Bahamas. Why do I like the Bahamas? The Bahamas are extremely close to the United States. They're just off the coast of Florida. For Western CPE one year, I actually lectured for their vacation seminars. I lectured in the Bahamas, and so what I did was I flew from Philly to Florida because my father's a snowbird there. I went to visit him. And then I took a flight from Fort Lauderdale to the Bahamas, and it was a fun flight because it lasted about 20 minutes. We actually went up in the air, went down. They couldn't even serve us drinks. It's that close. Now, it's that close. We don't have a treaty with them. Why? Because Bahamas doesn't think they need a treaty, and they're probably right. If the Bahamas were ever invaded, the United States would be there to repel the invasion because we don't want an enemy foreign country that close to us. And so the Bahamas, just by default, are within our protective sphere of our military. So they don't need a military treaty. From an economy, if you've ever been to the Bahamas, you probably have noted that they accept the American dollar there. And in fact, they do have Bahamian currency, but the Bahamian currency always equals the American dollar. One Bahamian dollar is equal to one American dollar. What does that mean? From an economics point of view, it probably means that the Bahamas, the banks have a pile of American cash in the banks, and they have issued Bahamian currency against the American currency they have, so the Bahamians can feel they have their own currency, but in reality, the Bahamas doesn't have economic sovereignty. They're basing their economy on the American dollar. So in certain ways, they don't have the same amount of freedom, let's say, that we have in America when it comes to the economy because they don't control their currency. Do they have a military? And the answer is not really. They don't really have an army or navy worth speaking of. They have a police force. They feel very close to the United States, and we are their protector. So why is there no treaty between the Bahamas and the United States? I'll tell you right now, the United States would love to have a treaty with the Bahamas. They don't necessarily like the idea of these offshore trusts. The Bahamas says we don't need a treaty because you're protecting us anyway. We're friendly with you anyway. But if we don't have a treaty, we can play some interesting games. We can attract individuals who want to create asset protection trusts, for example. We can attract them to come here and say, hey, there's no treaty. So here's the example now. I punched you in the nose. You got judgment entered against me for $100,000. You now tried to collect. And so you come to Philadelphia and you say, okay, what are your assets? And I'll give you a whole slew of assets you can't touch. You can't touch my qualified plan. That's protected under the ERISA statute. You can't touch annuities because I only have a right to income from them. You cannot touch jointly held property with right of survivorship between me and my wife because in order for you to collect under Pennsylvania law, to collect against those assets, my wife also had to hit you. I'm the only one who hit you, and so as long as my wife's alive, you can't touch that jointly held property. So what can you touch? Well, maybe I have a revocable trust. And so, yes, do you have any trust? Yes, I do. Oh, geez, this is a more asset protection technique. Do you have a revocable trust? Is your trust revocable? Yes, it is. Oh, revoke it. Get a court order. The only problem is my revocable trust is in the Bahamas. So, what ends up happening? I send a letter to my trustee. Dear trustee, I was sued in Pennsylvania. Actually, I was sued in California. A judgment was entered against me in California. They transferred it to Pennsylvania, where I am. And I owe $100,000, and I've been ordered by the court to take the money out of this trust and give it to the person I hit. A letter comes back from the court, from the trustee. Dear Mr. Werner, thank you very much for informing us that you have been sued and judgment has been entered against you. As you might be aware, paragraph 7 of the trust says the following. In the event that you are sued or judgment entered against you, the trust is no longer revocable. The trust becomes irrevocable until this matter is settled. You have no absolute right to the assets. The income and principal that is paid out of this trust will be paid by the sole discretion of the trustee. So I take this letter back to court and say, Your Honor, I tried to get the money out and the trustee won't give it to me. The judge might get extremely angry, so he sends a letter to the trustee himself. I am Judge John Doe of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Common Pleas Court, I hereby order you to pull money out of the revocable trust and pay the creditor accordingly. And if the trustee wanted to, he could send a very sarcastic letter back to the judge. He could say to the judge, I'd be happy to remove the money if you can prove one of two things. A, you prove that we are a state of the United States subject to the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution, or B, you can prove that there is a treaty between the Bahamas and the United States. And of course, there's neither. That's how it works. Now, is the creditor out? Is the person I owe the money to, the creditor, are they out of luck? Again, it might be you if you're one of my California attendees. So you say, you know something? I am a stubborn individual. I'm not going to let Art Werner get away with this. I'm going to find a way to sue him. So could you sue me where there'd be a judgment that would work? And the answer is yes, you could. You could sue me in the Bahamas because obviously the Bahamian courts will, or the trustees will honor a Bahamian judgment. There's a few problems with this. The first problem is as follows. It's called statute of limitations. There might be a 4-year statute in California, and don't quote me on that, it's not important, but it might be a 4-year statute in California. If I punched you in the nose, you had 4 years to file a claim. And you did within the term. You got that judgment. If you have an issue in the Bahamas, however, the statute of limitations might only be 2 years. It might be out of statute by the time you're doing this. You're out of luck at that point. Let's say somehow you manage to just get into the statute, so you're fine there. Now the next thing is you have to find an attorney to represent you. Can your attorney in California represent you? And the answer is no. That attorney is not licensed to practice law in the Bahamas. You have to actually hire a Bahamian attorney. Know this, the better attorneys are already working for the trusts. It's just the way it works there. So if you want to get an attorney, you're going to be getting the second stringers, not the first stringers. There's an issue with that coming up later. Next, how do you pay this attorney? Well, when you hired your attorney in California, your California attorney probably charged you on a contingency fee basis. Whatever we collect, I get a percentage of it. So you want to hire the Bahamian attorney under the same guise. But the problem is that's illegal in the Bahamas. In fact, there's only 2 countries in the world that I'm aware of that you're allowed to charge a contingency fee. That's the United States, and I believe Canada has now allowed it. It's a shame because I think that actually creates more lawsuits. In the Bahamas, you can only hire an attorney by the hour. That's the British rule. And in fact, if you bring suit against somebody, you actually have to file or pay actually for bonding. You have to pay for this because in the event that you lose, when you file suit and you lose, you actually have to pay the other attorney's legal fees. It actually puts a roadblock up now because now it's going to cost you money to bring a suit. You don't care. Remember, it's all principle now. So court date is scheduled. You get to court, and by the way, there were some witnesses that saw me punch you, and you had to bring them from California to the Bahamas because the case is going to be held in Nassau, let's say. You get to court. My attorney goes to the judge and says, Your Honor, I have about 2 or 3 other matters today in front of other judges. I can't be in all places at once. Is it okay if we get a continuance on this case? And the judge goes, no problem. How much would you like? Can I have 2 months? Sure. Well, now you're going to have to take your witnesses back to California. Unless you want to keep everyone in the Bahamas, that's going to cost you money. You're going to take them back to California. You're going to bring them back to the Bahamas. Which case we might ask for another continuance. Now, eventually, judges aren't going to be able to give you more continuances, so they're eventually going to have a hearing. And it's really cut and dry. I did punch you in the nose. There are witnesses. There's no reason that I wasn't defending myself. I was just a belligerent individual, and I'm going to lose the case. And in fact, the court is now in the hands of a jury, and the jury is ready to come back. Well, there is a funny law in the Bahamas when it comes to trust. If there is a trust involved in this scenario, in this case there would be because that's how they would collect. In order for you to pass Bahamian law, trustees of trusts must be informed of this potential judgment 1 day, 24 hours before it is announced to everyone else. So now my trustee already knows that the jury awarded is ruling that I did commit the assault, and that I'm going to be charged $100,000 as a penalty. And so, what will the trustee do? Since they have time, what they might do is they might go to another jurisdiction, open up another trust, and transfer the wealth out of the Bahamas and maybe to the Caymans, as an example. And guess what? You probably have to start this whole thing over again. What we're doing with the offshore trust is essentially wearing you out. Principle is one thing. This becomes an act of futility. And really what the offshore trust does is encourages people to settle cases. So let's say you get the $100,000 judgment entered against me, and I inform my trustee, look, if I can settle this for $10,000, I would really like you to pay it. And the trustee goes, well, it's your money, yeah. So we tell them, look, I think I can get the trustee to commit to paying $8,000. And eventually we end up working out, and I said, can't go any higher than 10. That's it. Trustee won't go any further than that. However, if you do that, you have to tell the trustee that that this is amount that settles the claim in full. So in other words, it's not just a partial payment. And if that's the case, I now submit that paperwork to the trustee, and the trustee says that's not a problem and cuts a check for $10,000, and we're done. So it's a great technique to utilize. Now, you can see how this can become interesting. There's something fun about this, although it's kind of sleazy fun if you think about it. I've just purposely annoyed an individual in more ways than one. Not only did I punch you in the nose, but I made it almost impossible for you to collect against me. Various islands or nations seem to be dealing with this. Various countries deal with it. Cayman Islands is an example. Caymans is technically a British protectorate, but they are semi-sovereign. And so they are deemed for asset protection purposes to not be part of Great Britain, because we do have a treaty with Great Britain, and so you can't use Great Britain as an offshore destination for asset protection, but Caymans you can use. The Cook Islands, they're out in the middle of the Pacific somewhere. From what I heard, there was an attorney out in, I believe it was Phoenix, Arizona. It was either Phoenix, Arizona or Denver, Colorado. I actually forget which one it is. Not important. But what he did was he actually flew to the Cook Islands, got a meeting with the Prime Minister of the Cook Islands, and said, if you can convince your parliament to pass certain asset protection laws, which I took the liberty to draft for you, and he hands in this law, says, if you can get them to pass this law, I will now be able to make the Cook Islands a destination for asset protection trusts. And why? Because I am going to market this as being, I'm the person who drafted the law, and I'll be the only one who really understands it. And guess what? Cook Islands actually took that attorney to heart, and they passed the law, and the attorney actually uses it as a marketing tool. I'll give you one more, the Isle of Man, for those of you who aren't geography majors. Now, when it comes to the Isle of Man, this is an island that is located between the island that contains Great Britain, England, Scotland, and Wales, and the island that contains Ireland and Northern Ireland. It's a small little island. It's actually closer to the British mainland than it is to Ireland. It's a protectorate of Great Britain right now, but actually an independent country that was formed under the Treaty of Westphalia, 1648. So it was one of these original European nation states. It is technically a British protectorate, but it is independent, and you can establish offshore trusts there. If a suit's brought there, there's so few attorneys on the Isle of Man that you can actually bring your own